Welcome here to the FWA profile. Well, we're joined by a man who makes little introduction, Neil Ashton, presenter of the Sunday Supplement, NBC Insider and Chief Football Reporter of the Sun.
That's it, spot on.
Spot on. We've just come to the end of the transfer window. You broke the story of Alexis Sanchez not getting on the coach to Bournemouth of Arsenal that set it all rolling. Tell me, as a journalist, transfer window, love it, loathe it, do you thrive on?
I don't actually, Carrie. No, I don't particularly enjoy it, and I know that a lot of people, I know they love it, and I know that the numbers on websites and people standing by their beds, they've got the television on, they're refreshing websites every 5 seconds, they're looking at Twitter every 2 minutes, but all I see is chaos, and I don't like the way that our industry has unfolded, and it's not just newspapers. This goes for the entire media industry. Is that we see stories that are inspired, they're imagined, and we are the collateral damage for that. I'm afraid there's no doubt about it. And it is the threshold for a story, and at what point you publish is very, very difficult, because we'll all have different opinions at what point that threshold is. But undoubtedly, it has changed from my first days as a national newspaper reporter with the Daily Mail, not as a national newspaper reporter with the Daily Mail. That threshold has undoubtedly changed, and I personally don't think it's changed for the better.
We'll get on to your inspirations, but as we're on this subject, what is your guide between pushing a story over the line? How do you ensure you're not being fumbled with fake news from agents?
Well, no, I mean, I'll go back to an example. I won't name the agent, I won't name the player, but in my previous incarnation in News of the World, I was asked to write a story about a Blackburn Rovers footballer, Blackburn Rovers in the Championship at the time. I was asked to write a story to say that Real Madrid were interested in player X at Blackburn Rovers, which would be a realistically six paragraph filler in the News of the World. And I said to the guy, well, one, is it true? Because Blackburn Rovers, let's be realistic here, aren't going to be selling footballers to Real Madrid. It's very unlikely. And that person said to me, no, it's not true, but I need you to do me a favour, because I need the player to see his name in the paper, be linked with Real Madrid, to give him a boost, and it will encourage other clubs to think, well, if Real Madrid are looking at this player at Blackburn Rovers, then maybe we should be looking at this player. You can see the theory, but you're not going to use me to do that. And it's not so I haven't been used in the past, because undoubtedly I have. I couldn't pretend otherwise. And there won't be many people who would be able to say they haven't had similar experiences. But those aren't pleasant experiences. I decided in the end, no, it's no chance. And that contact didn't speak to me and hasn't spoken to me since that day. So that gives you an example of the difficulties that you have with the job.
Why did you become a football journalist?
I realised actually when I was pretty young I wasn't going to be a professional footballer. I played for Hayes, and when I joined Hayes there was a guy called Dean Hooper, and Dean Hooper was at Hayes at the time, and the manager said to me, okay, so that's Dean Hooper over there, he's the right back, and in 2 weeks' time Dean's signing for Swindon Town. And Swindon Town were, I think, 3 divisions down from whatever it was back then. It wasn't League One, it would have been, I don't know, what would it be, Ensley League, whatever. So Dean Hooper played, and I played right back for one side. Dean Hooper, who was about to sign for Swindon, played right back for Hayes' first team in our training game. And Dean Hooper was the best player on the pitch by a mile. It was like watching Zidane, Maradona, and Ronaldo rolled into one. He dominated the game, and he was a level above everything else on that pitch that day. And I looked at Dean, who was about 24 at the time, I think, maybe a bit younger, I can't remember. Sorry, Dean, if you were younger. And I thought, you're not going to get to that level. I'm not going to get to that level, and he's playing to Swindon. So at that point, I said, okay, I'm done. I'm committing to, not at that point, by the way, but I knew that I was going to be a football journalist. It's something that when I was a lot younger, I believed I would become a football journalist. I was convinced, but I wanted to play as well, and I was juggling which you're going to do, which you're going to do. But the Dean Hooper experience at Hayes said to me, okay, you're not going to do it. You need to commit to being a football journalist, which I say eventually I did.
Who are your inspirations in terms of journalism away from Dean Hooper?
Well, when I was younger, I had a newspaper around, which is fairly standard, fairly traditional. I used to hate waking up in the morning, but the only thing that would motivate me to get up in the morning, early at 6 o'clock, whatever it was, to go and deliver newspapers, was seeing the back pages of the papers and all the stories from the night before, all the action from the night before, and just seeing the back pages and seeing how they'd been written. The great names, Brian Woolnough, my predecessor at Sky at Sunday Supplement. With one of them, Martin Samuel, who was starting out The Sun at the time, Lee Clayton, who was at The Sun as well at the time. As my career progressed, undoubtedly I looked on enviously and unashamed jealousy at Paul Hayward, because I love his style, love his touch, I love what he writes. I don't have to agree with it in the same way as I don't have to agree with anything any of my colleagues write and don't necessarily agree with. That's irrelevant. What is relevant is the style, the touch, the panache, the class and the charisma of that guy. And I just wish I was able to write like Paul Hayward. And I'm a different guy, I'm a different personality, I've got different skills, I've got different abilities. And unfortunately, one of those abilities is I'll never be able to write like Paul, but he's up there as one of the titans and one of the greats of our industry.
I think the world over agrees that we would all love to write like Paul Hayward. You are, however, brilliant.
I wonder if he gives out lessons.
I'm trying to get him.
Do you think he might dish out some? We could go and do an hour's tutorial with Paul Hayward.
No, I tried to. Paul Hayward did a profile here, and after.
Oh, what did he say? We get some free advice.
It's online. We can watch it.
I will watch it.
Afterwards, he said, "Can you take it down? Because I don't think it's any value to anyone." That's how modest he is.
Yeah, and there's me saying, "Get this up as soon as possible. Get this out there to everybody." Yeah. Told you we're different people.
Yeah, no, ridiculously modest, but yeah, brilliant journalist, and you can see his profile online on the FWA.
Okay, I'll look at it.
You are very good at what you do, and one of the great pieces you did was when Mourinho was sacked the last time at Chelsea, his departure behind the scenes. How do you get underneath the skin of a club like that, sir?
Carrie, that's years of ingraining and embedding yourself in a football club, in football, building the knowledge as you go, unquestionably. The manager doesn't get sacked at Chelsea and then all of a sudden, okay, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, the manager got sacked at 9:59, you start making phone calls. The knowledge is acquired as you go along, and you piece it together, and you either make mental notes or you make notes going along, because you may have written about certain elements. There'll also be a lot of things that you can't ordinarily write when a manager is in a job, because it may be something that is too sensitive. You may have been asked not to write it until a manager has been sacked, until a manager leaves, which is quite often, was not unusual. I would say quite often it's not unusual. And then you need, when that manager does get sacked, then you need to rely on the day that happens. You also need to rely on the current, the here and now, the people who are going to fill you in on what happened, how they did it, to the best of your ability. And you need to take, if you can, in my view, if I was an editor, and what I'd be asking of my journalists is, I need you to take me into those corridors, into the corridors of power. I need you to take me onto the team bus. I need you to take me into the manager's office. Wherever this was done, however it was done, I need you to take me there. I need that, and it's absolutely crucial that you give me as much information to make me think, wow, I just saw Mourinho get sacked. And that is what you have to do. And whether that's the little details, you mentioned Elton John being on the walls here. Not many people know that Elton John is on the walls here. But this situation is everywhere. And you've got to pick up little things like that. It's the little bits of detail, a tiny little bit of detail, which gives you credibility. And having the credibility and having the contacts and having the confidence to commit to the piece, to write it, and to write it with complete authority. That when you write, that what you know and the knowledge that you have at that time, at that moment in time, is the best that you can give. And I've been in those situations before when an editor, Les Snowden, for example, used to be at the Daily Mail, used to be at the Sun, used to drive me, now at the Sun, Les used to drive me mad because I would think, okay, this piece is done. This is everything I can give, and I would send it in, and I would be very happy, and I think, okay, I'm going to go and put my feet up now and be happy with a long day in the saddle and a hard day in the saddle. And then I'd get a phone call, it'd be Les. And Les would say, just need a bit more, just give us a little bit more, make another call, and it's always, when you make one more call in this job, is the most satisfying, because that one more call will usually lead you to the answer that you need, and it will give you that little bit more, in these cases of Mourinho being sacked or a manager being sacked, the extra bit of detail that makes the office and the editor go, wow, okay, we like this a lot. And that's the reassurance that you need from an editor in an office.
Those pieces you're magnificent at. I know you don't like talking about your work.
I don't do them enough. I don't do those pieces enough, to be honest. I should do more. I wish I could do more of that. That's undoubtedly what you just said there is what I'm best at.
2 articles, if you lost all your work in fire, never to be seen again, that would stand out for you, and you can explain to aspiring
2
journalists.
articles. Okay, so, excuse me, number 1, Euro 2008, and myself and Matt Lawton, we were joined at the hip at the time, and we still are, but we're not on the same papers anymore, but we were joined at the hip, inseparable, and we knew that Phil Scolari was getting the Chelsea job. So we started taking ourselves to the Portugal press conference where Scolari was in charge, and Scolari denied it. No, and eventually he says, okay, he's getting the job. I was at Euro 2008, loving it, loving life in Austria, and enjoying myself, crossing the border to Switzerland for the job, and going off to Neuchâtel for the Scolari press conferences. And it was a call that I knew would come, and it's almost my old boss Lee Clayton and I had almost a telepathic understanding, I would say, because I knew the call I was going to make to him, and he knew the call that he would make to me, which he didn't need to make, and I didn't need to make to him. And it was, get yourself on the first flight to Brazil, to Porto Alegre, which is where Scolari was from. He used to manage Grêmio successfully, among the millions of clubs that he's managed. Get yourself down to Brazil, be the first English journalist to go and do the background piece on Luis Felipe Scolari, who he is, where he's from, culture, family, the whole background piece, go and do it. That is undoubtedly one of the most satisfying pieces of my career. One, because I went and did it, because I just left the Euros, just disappeared in a puff of smoke, flew to Brazil via Lisbon, and the second element of that was I was so nervous about writing such a big piece that I phoned Paul Hayward and I said, Paul, I'm out in Brazil and I've written this piece on Scolari, would you have a look at it for me? I need to make sure it's the piece, it is the piece. And because I put a lot of energy and my heart and soul into that piece, and Paul came back to me with, okay, it wasn't with the class and the craft of Hayward, I accept it. But it got this seal of approval from Hayward. It was file it. And once I knew that Hayward had given me that, and I wouldn't ordinarily do something like that, but it was so important to me and Hayward's seal of approval was important as well. That's the second. The third element of that story was when that was done. As luck would have it, Brazil were playing Argentina in a World Cup qualifier up in Belo Horizonte. And I went up to see that game, and Messi played for Argentina, and it was one of the great finishes to a job. You know, I was in South America, just done the Scolari hit, and then Brazil-Argentina happened to be on, and who am I to turn a job like that down? And then went to Rio for a few days afterwards. That's number one. That's probably one of the standouts. The second one, again, I was at the Daily Mail at the time, and England were playing Croatia, so we're in Zagreb preparing for Croatia against England. Gianfranco Zola got the West Ham job while we were there. He's the coach of the under-21s, Italy under-21s, who were playing Croatia on the night before the England game. And again, the telepathic understanding. I knew what was coming. I was in Zagreb, and the boss said, Zola's 300 miles down the track, and you need to go and see him. I said, no, I'm at the England press conference, and England are playing tomorrow. This is really important stuff. England are playing, and I wouldn't like to leave England. And I got the go and do it, and I got a taxi to wherever Zola was with the under-21s. I watched the under-21 game in the freezing cold in Croatia, totally underclubbed in terms of the clothing that I had on. Went to the under-21 game. As you can often do in these situations when they're in their far-flung outposts, you can walk onto the pitch at the end of the game and you can speak to whoever you want to speak to. In this case, walked straight up to Zola, asked him about the job, and he gave me chapter and verse on his new job as the West Ham manager before he'd given his official press conference at West Ham. He was still nominally the under-21 manager at Italy. And it was one of those occasions where it's absolutely the right decision. You're with England, but you've got an opportunity here to go and see the new West Ham manager. He's 300 miles down the track. Just get a taxi. I mean, it wasn't a cheap taxi, and I made sure it wasn't a cheap taxi because it really aggravated me and put me out that I had to go to the Italy under-21s to go and see Zola. But the next day in the Daily Mail, across 3 pages, was Gianfranco Zola, across the back page, new West Ham manager. And those are the things that make you believe in the job again, make you believe that this is a job worthwhile and that you can get satisfaction out of it.
One article I wanted to raise whenever I was going to speak to you, but we're recording this actually very sadly a week after the passing of Paul Alcock, the Premier League referee. I have to say that's probably one of the most horrible articles I've written, and with the greatest respect, because it's on Paul's fight with cancer, and anyone touched with cancer knows how brutal it is. And the way you wrote that was incredibly delicate, because what he was going through, and clearly, talk us through the process and how hard that is to write an article like that.
Yeah, tough, because I'd actually approached Paul Alcock initially because I'd never heard him talk about the incident with Paolo Di Canio up at Hillsborough, and I thought, okay, this would be an interesting read. And someone passed me his number. I text him, which is not a usual practice these days. I explained who I was, what I wanted to do, and whether Paul would be receptive to talking about it. Kind of 20 years on from the incident, around nearly 20 years on, and then I got this a message I didn't expect, because quite often the answer is no. I don't want to do it. Fine, okay, we'll leave it there. And the message Paul sent back was, I'm really sorry, I'd love to talk about it, but I'm fighting cancer at the moment, and I didn't know anything about that. It'd been kept very quiet, and he wanted time to think about it, which he did over a period of weeks. And obviously you give someone respectful distance. I left it, kept in touch with him, how are you, and how's the treatment more than anything else. And then he turned around and said, okay, I want to do it. He'd spoken with Mike Riley, the referee's chief. He was ready to do it, he wanted to talk about it, and I went to his home in Kent, sat down with him in his living room, and yeah, those interviews are difficult because the person you're talking to knows that they're in a fight for their life. They know they're in a daily battle, and that their existence, that they are relying on their existence because of surgeons, drugs, medics, doctors, nurses, and they are entirely dependent on those people to keep them alive. And they have incredible moments of emotion and difficulties talking about it. And Paul that afternoon had those moments, and they're difficult when you know somebody. They're very, very difficult. But when you don't know somebody and you have compassion, but the sentiment side, when you don't know somebody, it's harder to deal with appropriately. But he spoke with incredible candour and honesty, and I could see then, as without him without articulating it, I knew then that things were going to, the chances of Paul successfully coming through this was a long shot. That was clear. I think he knew that, and I knew that without it being said. And when I did hear news that he passed away, it instantly took me back to that afternoon in his home when he had allowed me into it and to share some of his life and experiences and what he was going through. And when you have those moments, when you see people in having those difficulties and going through such a difficult time, then I think it makes us all appreciate what we do have, what we do for a living, what we do for a job. And it is, of course, very sad. And I did write about it in my column last week about Paul, and I just felt that it was important that his family, who will have some very, very difficult moments, weeks, months, days ahead, that they knew what a lovely guy and what a sincere guy, and what a lovely gentleman and what a lovely chap that I thought he was that day.
And in terms of what Ash has been talking about in the past about detail, it really, for anyone studying football journalism, I really should have a read of that. It's a very good article. We'll move on to another point of your job.
We're going to have some fun now.
I don't know if you're going to enjoy this bit.
Come on.
You have to be brutally honest on how you feel about performances.
Oh, this is no fun.
This is no fun. Mr. Ozil.
Ozil, yeah, the Wizard of Ozil.
Yeah.
Is he nicking a living still? He's nicking 350 grand a week now.
He's nicking 350 grand, but on the night in question,
yes.
Unfamiliarly in Munich, not having a game, in which even last year in Munich he was criticised by the German media. You accused him of nicking a living, and that very much you were entitled to, and you've had a lot of abuse for it since, but being a columnist, you have to have a thick skin.
Do you?
And do you not?
I don't. I'm a little sensitive soul. I have quite strident views. I am passionate. I love the game. I love the sport. I love the combat. I love the commitment. I love the dedication. Sorry, those are all the values. Those are all my values. And I like to see that from footballers. And I want to see that. And I believe at the highest level that you are entitled to see that. That night in question, Ozil went off injured. We didn't know that he was injured at the time. Do I regret it? Perhaps the phrase was one of those unforgettable phrases. It's not the first time it's been used, but it's the first time I'd used it about in a piece. It hasn't been forgotten. Henry Winter referenced it in an interview with Ozil once. It wasn't pleasant, but we write contentious pieces. We're a live game. We're under pressure to write, to commit to deadlines, to write at speed in a certain amount of time. And when you're writing about a certain individual who doesn't seem to be performing when he returns to Germany in an Arsenal shirt, and to my mind that night, as I watched it unfold, at that moment in time, didn't look like he fancied it. Okay, he's injured, but I didn't know that at the time. It's only after that. But as a career experience, it wasn't a pleasant one, and we learn from these things. We tried to learn, and we tried to remember. And look, it wasn't a great night. It wasn't a great period. I wouldn't pretend otherwise. Come, let's have some fun.
But my point being with that, it wasn't. In terms of, if you look at Ozil's career, there are games.
Look how defensive I've got.
I know. I was literally thinking that, and I was feeling bad for asking it now, because it's odd. Because I think genuinely you had every right, and Ozil has got this regal figure now and is being asked to lead. But in periods of his career, he has vanished out of games, and therefore, it was at the time, without knowing about the injury, exactly right at that time to make that call if you hadn't known he was injured.
Yeah, no, it was a big call. It was a big call to make on the night, undoubtedly. But look, it's only because we love seeing these guys play. You know, we know his potential. We only have this passion because we see the silky skills, we see the touches, we see the pirouettes, we see the roulette moves. We know what he's capable of doing. We know he drifts through games. We know he's got the touch. You know, he's got this velvet glove on the end of his boot. You know, we know all about that with those. So when you see players with that potential, unlimited potential, that you want to see every time you go to a game, I want to see him perform. That's why we go, because I'm not capable of doing. He's doing something I'm not capable of doing. And when when you believe in someone in that way, it's not, oh, let's get into Ozil week. Oh, let's turn the media agenda onto him. It wasn't about that. It was about, I want to see this guy perform, and I believe he can. I believe he can. I can believe he can play better than the way he was playing for Arsenal that night. You've performed. You've got an Arsenal legend now. You'll get your statue. Don't worry.
And much as we've seen in this last window, or this last half season, building up to this, when Alexis Sanchez all but was gone, Ozil really put in the commitment, and we are seeing what we want to see from him week in, week out now.
Well, he's been asked to. Wenger has asked him to be a technical leader, whatever that means. He's probably a technical leader every day in training, I would imagine. We see the other side of it with Alexis Sanchez, because Sanchez checked out probably 6 months ago at the end of the transfer window, when Arsenal pulled the plug on that move to Manchester City in the last few moments. But Ozil has got responsibility. He's got his new contract. We saw the way that he played at the weekend. That he is a lovely player. No one would doubt that. You'd be crazy to say he's not a gifted footballer and skillful, silky footballer. But sometimes I'm not alone in this. I believe there is more, and I believe there is a more polished and a better player inside Mesut Ozil than we see every single week.
That's what I wanted to talk about. Right. 5 tips for journalists.
5 tips. 5 tips. Yes.
Or your Ash's key tips.
Ash's 5 tips. Okay. What have I learned?
Don't sit down and do a profile, Carrie.
Number 1, never ever give up. Never give up. It's an absolute key. It is. Maybe we won't get to 5, but I think these will all be related. Don't give up. Don't be intimidated. I've never been afraid of phoning anybody. If I've got their number, I'm happy to phone it. If any number on my phone, it's not like I don't care who it is. I've got respect for people and who it is. But if I've needed to call somebody, I don't look at my phone. I don't sit on my sofa or in the office, or if I'm in a cafe, if I need to make a phone call, I don't think, oh, should I make this call or not? Just dial the number. Just dial it and do it, okay? Because it's just another human being. Strip away whatever they are, manager, chief executive, chairman, owner. If you've got their number, you're entitled to call it. If they say don't call me again, you might want to respect that. But never be afraid of phoning a number. So never give up. Never give up. Always, if you have the number, be prepared to phone it. And thirdly, if you're a young journalist and you have if you're a young journalist and your requirements are to hit the phones, always make one more phone call. I can't tell you the amount of times, and I can remember being in my old flat when I used to live in central London. I can remember day in, day out, it felt like day in, day out, of making one more phone call. Make one more phone call. And you think the job is done, or you think you're getting to the end of a story and you've nailed that story, or you're not quite there with the story and you're umming and ahhing about, it's 5 o'clock, it's 6 o'clock, what about my evening? Is it going to disrupt my evening with whatever I'm doing that night socially? Is it going to affect it? Make one more call. I can't tell you the amount of times that one more call, it's almost as though you've had the inspiration. Who do I phone? That's the person to phone. Okay, that's another tip. Always take down numbers. Number 4, if you're given a number, never ever, don't dismiss it. Write it down. You've got the facility now to put it in your phone and never to lose it. And number 5. I could say about 10 here, but it's coming to me now. It's coming to me now. Number 5 is live vicariously through the people that you admire. And when I say that is because when I was younger delivering newspapers, I lived vicariously through Harry Harris or Brian Woolnough, Martin Samuel, Lee Clayton. I used to pick up the papers and I'd look at their stories, I'd look at the way the stories were written, and I would think, how do you write like that? Could I write like that now? If someone gave me a computer and said, write that story, would I be able to assemble the story in the way they've done it for a newspaper because it's a certain style, as we know, it's a certain skill. So that's one, the skill, the art of writing a story or a piece or a feature, an interview. And secondly, how did they come across the news? How did that person, how did Martin Samuel, how did Sean Custis, how did Lee Clayton, how did these guys come across that information to be able to write it, live vicariously through them, become them? I didn't want to be any of them. I probably did actually. No, but how did they do it? I wanted to become like them. I wanted to do the job as well as them, if not better. I wanted to work out how to do it. And I think you have to live vicariously through them. How do they do it? Put yourself in their shoes at all times when you're thinking about your job, and even when you're not. And I think that helps. Not that anyone would want to live vicariously through me, but there will be others like Hayward that watch how this guy writes, watch how he operates, mimic him, copy him, steal some of his best stuff, and you will start to develop your own writing personality and your own profile and the way that you believe the job should be done. And I think that would help. So yeah, don't follow my stuff. Follow Paul Hayward, okay?
We get this from everyone. Everyone do this. Never follow me. Who was it? We all have to be completely impartial and not wowed by any interview we do. But when was the one day you had to really pinch yourself, put your shoulders back, and think, "Is this really happening to me?"
That's a belting question.
First,
Is this happening to me? I'd go back to 2003, and this is a phone call. This is a classic example. Jeff Thomas, ex-Crystal Palace, ex-England player, had Jeff's number, never ever met him, loved him as a footballer, loved him. Loved his spirit, loved his attitude, loved his dedication, his application, loved him as a footballer at Palace. And I had Jeff's number, I'd never met him, and there was one line in the Sun, one line to say Jeff Thomas, at 37, I think, had been diagnosed with leukemia. Wow. That's like hearing a member of my family. That's how it felt, even though I'd never met him. I felt that I somehow knew Jeff. That is a classic example of having a number and saying, okay, ring it. And talking to Jeff, I was at the Sunday People at the time, and I phoned Jeff mid-morning, I think, and that's the only time I've cracked making a phone call to somebody to speak to them about what they were going through. And I still don't know to this day why Jeff agreed, but he said, okay, can you come to Barnt Green in Birmingham, where Jeff lives, tomorrow to do the big story about the former England footballer, the former Palace, former Wolves midfielder who'd been diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia. So the wow moment, pinch yourself, it wasn't particularly fulfilling. I didn't take any pleasure from that phone call or the interview, but I took a great deal of pleasure from getting to know Jeff Thomas. There's no doubt about that. And for someone that you idolised to then become one of your best friends in life, I think that's pretty amazing. And that shows how life can throw up some pretty remarkable things from time to time. And I'm glad to say that Jeff had a successful bone marrow transplant and has been trouble-free ever since.
And has become a remarkable champion for
and he has, yeah. Thanks for mentioning that, because I didn't want to go, talk about that endlessly. But yes, he has become a champion and a pretty inspirational figure and a role model, yeah.
And you've been on the road helping him out, so we're going to mention that. On your bike.
On my bike.
On your bike.
On my bike, I can go.
A big support. You can. Before you go, one thing that happened to you to make everyone else feel better in the field, it can happen to Neil Ashton too. When it's all gone crazily wrong, never?
All crazily wrong. My laptop's never failed. I have, however, been a very rewarding night at the Sun. A more rewarding day for Louis van Gaal was I was in Alderley Edge having dinner with some friends on the night that Van Gaal got sacked by Manchester United, and I got a panicked phone call from the office. It was about, I don't know, 8 o'clock in the evening, something like that, so an hour before deadline, and I'm out and I'm with friends. All I've got is my phone, and they're asking for the big hit on Louis van Gaal, Manchester United sacking him, the instant reaction, and all I could do was tap that out on my phone, on my iPhone. So I'm sat at dinner doing this at a million miles an hour to get that piece through. And one of the guys, one of the subs, so I sent that piece, and it was, in my mind, it was off the cuff, rough and ready, but done. And one of the guys, one of the chief subs at the Sun, sent me a lovely, touching email to say that to do on your iPhone, fair play. And it's nice when you get those occasional moments, because sometimes needs must. I didn't have a laptop. I was out. I was out with friends, and that was not a technology failure, but we found a way to get around Louis van Gaal's sacking.
You're never off this job, and that was a fantastic insight, Mr. Ashton. Many
Pleasure,
thanks.
anytime.
We've got a match to cover.
So looking forward to it.
Thanks very much.